Good afternoon, welcome to you all. My name is Dave Clark. I'm Aurum's Chief Executive for Southern Africa, and I'm going to be presenting to you today on Aurum Stratplan 2016. So no, you're not misreading, 2116, 100-year vision. I'm going to be presenting to you a global vision for something that's really special. If we could look at the next slide. Firstly, bad luck to you. You're in the right time frame. You're in the wrong place because you're going to have to listen to me for the next hour or so. And I need to advise you that there is a test at the end of this. You need to do 80% on this test, failing which you're going to have to listen to me again. Okay, so really take a lot of detailed notes. No, seriously, I'm going to be presenting to you a 100-year vision for this organization that you joined today. Very appropriately, it's World AIDS Day today, 2016, and I'm delighted that you can be here as part of Aurum. I'm going to be presenting to you a timeless vision, something that goes beyond obviously our lifetimes. If it's a 100-year vision, most of us, well perhaps excepting for Helen, won't be here in 100 years' time to actually check up on whether we got this right. Maybe one or two of you also planning on 100 years as well. We need to make sure that we have something that is truly timeless, and that's what I'm hoping to present to you today, and that is what Aurum strives to become. And yeah, Helen will measure us in about 100 years' time to see if we did do all the things that we said here today. So let's move on to the next slide. Aurum has an inspiration which comes from our global chief executive, Gavin Churchard, who founded this company in 1998. That inspiration that he is following and which we are following is to remain a relevant organization 100 years from now. I guess you're asking yourself, 100 years from now? Who can be relevant in 100 years? Well, there are organizations that are relevant 100 years after they were founded. Let's have a look at some examples. The top one, the Red Cross. Everybody know the Red Cross? Okay, excellent. Yes, of course, they do first aid, they do training, they do global responses to disasters. They were founded in, as you can see there, 1863. So they're well over 100 years old and they are still relevant today. You know who they are. The second one, KNCV Tuberculosis Foundation, started in 1903. Does anybody know of KNCV? Does anybody know of Aurum? I'm delighted to hear it. We are more famous than KNCV. You see, already we are on this road. Look, they started in 1903, well over 100 years old. In fact, they're a TB organization founded in the Netherlands and are still doing TB work globally to this day. That's the kind of thing that we aspire to be. Obviously, we're succeeding because you know who we are, but you don't know who they are. I'm very pleased to hear it. The International Union Against TB and Lung Disease had their first meeting in 1867. Again, over 100 years, and they're still relevant today. Their last major conference, I think it was their 47th conference, international conference, was held just last month in Liverpool. Still relevant today. Save the Children Foundation, not quite there yet, but close. And then more recently I discovered the Salvation Army is well over 150 years old, and you know who they are. They are relevant today because they are founded on some basic principles, which are what we are following as well. So what are some of those principles about organizations that can last 100 years? Well, they all started in response to a local need, whatever that local need might have been, something that got them on the road, as it were. Aurum did as well. In 1998, we started looking into the issues of TB in mine workers who had silicosis, which is a disease of the lungs in which mining dust gets in, and that dust forms a scaffold for tuberculosis. And then, of course, on top of that came the explosion of the HIV epidemic. So we started looking at that local need and have expanded from that position, as these other organizations have done. They have done their expansion globally, and I will show you that we are planning to do the same, because it's part of a 100-year vision. And they all have something timeless about them that keeps them relevant. So if we are about HIV and TB today, and 100 years from now there's no HIV and TB, well then we will have lost our reason for existence. So we need to have something that makes us relevant into that future. So what is the timeless thing that Aurum will continue to support throughout the next 100 years? The best example I can think of comes from the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who speaks of TB being the child of poverty and also its parent and provider. Now, that sounds a bit like a paradox. How can something be a child and a parent at the same time? Well, it's fairly easy to explain, as I'm sure you can for yourself. In the first instance, we know that people who have TB are generally driven into a state of poverty. If you are sick, you can't work, you can't get to earn a living, you can't earn a living, you get poor. By the same token, we know that people who live in poverty, not by their own choice, not because they want to be there, have a much greater risk of getting TB. So this cycle goes round and round, and there is something of the common factor. That's the issue of the day. That's the common thing that goes on in relevance into the future. I'm not saying something new. If we look at the next slide, from Matthew 26, verse 11, you will always have the poor with you, and I think you know that intuitively. We can do something as an organization and be relevant because there will always be people who are struggling in one form or another to emerge from poverty, to get out of this trap, this cycle that keeps them down. And often it has major health-related repercussions. It's that renders us relevant into the future. It's what we've been doing up until now, and it's what we will continue to do in the future. Whether it's TB and HIV today, and something else tomorrow like SARS virus, or maybe Zika virus 2, or perhaps it's going to be diabetes, or hypertension, or obesity, or whatever those things are, there will be something relevant in the future which affects the poor. And that then brings us to what Aurum's vision statement is. What are we here about as an organization? I just love this photograph of these two boys taken in Tembisa, which is one of the areas that we work. They're kind of up against the wall, as you can see there. We want to help them be up against the world with this vision. We want to be internationally respected as an organization, and we are. We are rooted in Africa. We are not some organization that comes from North America or perhaps in Europe and flies into Africa and tells everybody how to do it. We are African. Our heart is in Africa. You can see our badge on our materials. Africa is in our heart, and our hearts are in Africa. We are rooted in Africa, but we do need to go beyond that. We need to be a global leader in improving the lives and health of poor people living in poor communities. That's what is our vision. That's what we are here to do. This is what we aspire to continue to be relevant into the future. Underneath that is a mission statement, which is important to each and every one of you as you go about your daily work and what you do for Aurum. This is what I need you to be absolutely passionate about, committed to. And it doesn't matter whether you're working in data management, whether you're in finance, whether you're at the sharp end, and maybe you're really at the sharp end and you're doing circumcisions on people. Whatever it is that you're doing, you need to be passionate and committed to improving the health of the poor. And as I said, everyone has a role. If you're in data management, your commitment to the poor is making sure that the data that goes back to make sure good decisions in those communities is the very best that you can. If you're in human resources, you need to make sure that, for example, you're getting the right people who can serve these communities. And we do that through innovation. Innovation in health research. We're a health research company at our heart. Technical support. That means helping others improve the systems that they have for healthcare. And through program delivery. A number of our programs actually deliver healthcare. So we're a very widely organized organization. We go right from basic sciences through different types of clinical trials into strengthening government programs and in actually delivering care in our own clinics, as you will see in a short while. That's the mission. That's what we care about. That's what I need you to care about as you go from today, World AIDS Day 2016, into the year that lies ahead. Okay, so we have a vision and we have a mission. But you need to understand what is our strategic intent. What does Aurum want to do to live up to that mission? And what will your role be will become apparent as we go through this. Firstly, we need to build a sustainable Aurum. Okay, we've been in existence now for 18 odd years. We need to be sustainable into the next years, which take us up to that 100. And we're going to do that through two things. The first is to have relevant, influential and impactful programs. Obviously, that's the main reason for why we are here. Our programs of work have to be relevant to the communities in which we work. They need to be influential, not just on their communities, but also on global policy. And we do that, and I'll give you some examples of that as we go along. and they need to make a difference. They need to have impact. It's no good that we have relevant programs that influence a lot of people at policy level, but it makes no difference to the community. By the same token, it's no point in having something that impacts a small community in one place but doesn't make a broader global difference. So that's the first thing. We need to make sure we deliver on what it is we say we do as an organization. But secondly, we will not be sustainable if we just stick to our little area here at the southern tip of Africa. We need to make sure we are deliberately planning, carefully executing, and soundly operating our local work and expanding into regional and international growth areas. Why do I say that? Is because the funding landscapes which form organizations like us are shifting. Look at global politics. In the last couple of months, who could have believed that global politics would shift the way they've done? A month ago, you would not have particularly betted on any particular individuals winning the US presidential race. And yet we woke up on a Tuesday morning, I think it was, or a Wednesday morning, and the political landscape had changed. With that will come changes in funding. The healthcare burden will change over time. Maybe we'll find a cure for AIDS. As you probably know, yesterday we launched, amongst us and other organizations, a study called HVTN 702. It's the first HIV vaccine efficacy trial that has been conducted now in 7 years. That's how long it's been bringing this particular vaccine to the fore. Aurum has 3 sites in that vaccine, so maybe it works. We really, really hope that it does. Well, if it does work, our work will change too. We'll stop trying to look at supporting antiretroviral programs over time. It's not going to happen overnight. But we will then want to start supporting the rollout of a vaccine that we know works. So, and then if it all does work, then HIV will hopefully be condemned to the history books and something else will take its place. That means we need to be doing that second thing. So that's our strategic intent. And part of the objective of today is to share with you what is our strategy to achieve that intent. And the intent, as I said, underpins our vision and our mission. So let's have a look at Aurum strategy. And this is where it's really going to be relevant to you. You'll know how we're working as an organization. You'll know what your role is in that. Firstly, our board has approved 4 strategic themes. And we're not going to look at each one of those little dots over there. And I promise that won't come up in your test at the end. Well, maybe I'll lie. Maybe it will. Seriously, there are 4 themes that we need to follow in the next couple of years strategically. Firstly, we need to consolidate and strengthen our current business. Hence, a lighthouse built on a rock. Aurum is 18 years old. It has developed a profile of work. It's developed a set of programs of work. It's developed a reputation for that. If we don't keep that rock very firm and stable and build on it, the rest of the themes there will collapse, but like building your house on the sand. So that means we need to be accountable for what we do and deliver on what we said we would do. When we told our funders we would do A, B, or C, we must do A, B, or C. We need to make sure that we diversify in Southern Africa. As I've said, the revenue patterns are changing. If we are only going to be relevant in South Africa and the funding moves to a Southern African perspective, we could become irrelevant. That's all part of consolidating and strengthening the organization as it stands today. And it's the reason why a number of you are in the room today, as we are building up our systems and abilities to strengthen the organization. Secondly, as you saw from that intention slide, we need to undertake strategic international growth. Those organizations that become 100 years old grew internationally. We're going to do the same, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. Thirdly, we need to make sure we have a really sound profile and develop our communication to the world out there. We are well known in the communities in which we work, and I think some of you have worked in those communities. You'll know when an Aurum vehicle drives around, they know who it is and what we stand for. But if you were to go to the US right now and say Aurum, well, I guess most of the USA would say who? But like saying Africa, where? Well, Africa's in our hearts and Aurum, but we need to build that up. Because there are a lot of funders, there are a lot of people who are interested in the type of work that we do, but they don't know about us. And that's not just true of the likes of the States, even within our own country. If you go to the JSE, and we've done that, and you go and present yourself there, they go, who? Because there's lots of organizations making a noise about HIV and TB. We need to be one of those that stands out. It's about profile development. And then lastly, if we're going to be 100 years old, well, we better make sure that we don't just rely on the present leadership. We need to build on our intellectual capacity, our intellectual capital, as they call it, and our competitive advantages to make sure that there's sustainable leadership, there's sustainable next generation people that are taking over the baton from the present individuals. People want to grow. When you joined Aurum today, you didn't come here to do what some say. We want people that start at the bottom and stay there. No, we want people to grow. You want to grow. We need to make sure that there's a strategy in place that helps people to grow and stay with us and get into that next 100 years. So those are the 4 themes our board has approved for us to follow. Giving teeth to that now, let me explain what we actually do practically. Sustainable outcomes is the center of our strategy. Sustainability not just for ourselves. We don't just want to be here so that we have a job. Sustainable means that the communities, the poor, are benefiting from us in a way that keeps it going, teaching people to fish, as it were. And the inputs to sustainable outcomes, something that lasts, are reflected in the slide around here. The first one and the most important input to a sustainable Aurum, and by extension to sustainable jobs for yourselves, is Aurum defining impact. The work that we do needs to make a difference. Now there are inputs to that I'll come back to in a short while, but that is critically important. What we do must make a difference, because if it makes a difference and we show it to our funders, funders will say, well, if you're making a difference here, maybe you can make a difference there. Now this isn't just pie in the sky. Yesterday we were at the Department of Health showcasing what has been done in one of our programs in circumcision. Now that program has delivered impact in the area of MMC, as we call it. It has impact, and the Department of Health wants to know how they can take that impact and roll it out elsewhere in the country. If they want to do that, that provides us with sustainability for ourselves and outcomes for the people we work with. So that's the first and most important input to sustainability. The second one relates to core funding. Now those especially going to be working in finance are going to know it becomes very relevant very quickly that core funding is a key issue for this organization, as it is for many NGOs. NGOs struggle with one big thing. Funders want to fund their projects. They do not want to fund the organization that actually carries those projects out. So a bit like any corporate, there are overheads. There's a cost of running an organization. Funders are not particularly keen on funding those things. They like their project, be it a garden for people to grow food, or a big MMC program, or rolling out antiretrovirals, or a vaccine trial. Very keen on the project. They're not too keen on the HR and the finance and the IT systems and the governance systems and everything else that is in the background of those organizations. Now, big corporates call that overheads, and they usually have a slice of that. We too, like any organization, have overheads. We've got to fund those overheads. Funders do provide some cover for that, but they do not provide it all. Secondarily, if you want to grow, you can't grow out of your funders, because they don't give us surpluses, margins, profits, as it were. We're a not-for-profit organization. So we've got to find funding to help us grow as an organization, and that comes from 3 broad strategic areas. Firstly, very careful management of the monies that we bring in and out of the country. A lot of our money is dollar-based. We've got to be very careful how we bring that money in and how we send it out again. Because as you know, the rand goes like this, from day to day, from hour to hour, in fact. On Friday, we had a very big NEC meeting in the country. I think people will know what I'm talking about. And there was a prospect of the president being recalled. On the strength of that prospect, the rand strengthened. The international markets saw this as a good thing. On Monday, the ANC came out and announced that there's no such thing as a recall of the president, and you saw what happened to the rand. It went from around about 13.45, 13.50 and went back to around 14. It's a very fickle thing. So that's just one example. Next thing we have a drought, then the rand weakens, and then it strengthens because somebody discovers oil or gold or something. And all the while, as an organization based on currencies outside of here, we face volatility. Careful management of that means we can support that core very carefully. The second area is obviously we need to have global presence. And you'll see the numbers on the screen there, 501c. 501c is the schedule in the United States for their not-for-profit companies. We have established Aurum USA. The purpose of that company, which is structured very much like this one, which is a not-for-profit public benefit organization, is to tap into the potential of American philanthropy. The United States is a very generous philanthropic nation. That's part of their nature. But they do tend to want to donate those funds to causes which gives them, like anybody else, some kind of tax relief. So if you can donate your money and get something of tax relief from that, well, good and well. It requires a 501c structured company to do that. So the first purpose of Aurum USA is to potentially tap into that donation market. And the second point of it is, as a global organization, we want to tap into grants that perhaps only US organizations can apply for, and which require US citizens to be part of the application. So in creating Aurum USA, and you'll see it on the website, part of that is to employ US citizens that need to be based in the USA and pay them appropriately there, and also assist them with the tax issues that you face when you're a US citizen. But secondly, it also enables us to then apply for grants that only US organizations can apply for. So why US particularly? Well, as I said, it's one of the biggest grant funding nations in the world. So strategically, we have placed ourselves there as well. And lastly, we have a very unique structure in this company, which is a parallel for-profit company. Its name is Aurum Innova. It's based in Stonehouse, in the same property where our head office is. And Aurum Innova has a mandate to take intellectual capital that we have in the organization and exploit it for profit. Now, when I say exploit, it sounds like, we're doing something underhand. It's not underhand in the slightest, for two reasons. Firstly, some of the work that we do as an organization is of a service-related nature. Now, the revenue authorities in this country have granted Aurum itself a tax-exempt status. We don't pay tax as an organization. But it is dependent upon us not competing unfairly with other organizations that do pay tax, and we do the same work as them. Much of our work doesn't compete with other for-profit organizations, but some of the work that we do competes. And where it competes, we should pay our taxes and be a good corporate citizen. So yes, we can make a legitimate profit in some of those service areas, but we must then contribute as a citizen does. So that's what Aurum Innova does in the first instance. And the second component of what they do there is that they do make a profit from areas that we can usefully put out into the market. But that entire profit made there doesn't go to benefit individual shareholders or people within that organization. That entire profit comes back into the not-for-profit company to support the core. A very interesting structure, and it works particularly well. So it protects us from losing our tax-exempt status, and secondarily, it helps lever funds from normal trading into supporting the not-for-profit work of the organization. So that's how we strategically support core funding towards sustainable income. The third and the most important part of the strategy with respect to that outward growth comes from diversification, a strategy to make sure that we are not a one-trick pony. Now, those of you familiar with the grant funding world will know that the PEPFAR is the President's Emergency Fund for AIDS Relief, started by the Republicans in the United States, carried into the future by the Democratic Party, and then from there have been bipartisan support for this project, which has been struggling to tackle AIDS across the globe. If Aurum just depends on PEPFAR funding as an organization, and PEPFAR winds down either because they changed the president who says this is a crock of nonsense, we're not getting involved, or because they decide that they're going to focus on their own economy, and we are dependent entirely upon that particular funding, well, then fairly obvious, we'll be irrelevant, or we'll find ourselves in financial difficulty. Or alternatively, If we are a one-trick pony and all we do is TB and HIV, and as I said, we succeed spectacularly to cure TB and HIV, we become irrelevant. So we need to diversify. It's a bit like the old chicken, eggs in one basket story. I think most of you are familiar with that. You don't walk around with all your eggs in one basket, because if you drop the basket, you break the eggs. Same thing. We must make sure that our funding stream and the work we do is diversified across a number of different areas. Either in scope, in other words, going beyond TB and HIV into areas like diabetes, hypertension, non-communicable diseases of other descriptions, other infective diseases. That's a scope change. Funding diversification, not just being dependent upon PEPFAR. In our funding stream right now, we have a very, very large range of funders. PEPFAR is very important, absolutely. But USAID is also there, NIH, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, a number of different clinical trials in different spaces, all help diversify the funding sources. Another important part of diversification of funding is looking at regional type grants, even international type grants, which means we're not just dependent on funding flowing to South Africa. And then lastly, and obviously, geographic diversification. Today, we are primarily involved in South Africa. We have a little bit of work here and there, but as you see, it's rapidly expanding. Funders are also looking at other areas, and there are funding opportunities elsewhere. We need to be geographically diversified as well to take advantage of these different opportunities. That contributes particularly to sustainable outcomes. And we're going to do that through mergers and acquisitions. There are a number of other organizations who are particularly good at a particular thing. Instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, let's just bring them on board with us in some kind of alliance or partnership, or even become one organization. We may just work with partners, and then largely organic growth into new areas. All of those require us to make sure that we have the right staffing and expertise in place. I've mentioned Aurum's profile. We must make sure that people know of the work that we do, so that when we apply for things, we are known for being successful at those things. And we have seen that this works in grants up until now, in as much as that does as well. And then lastly, stable, aligned leadership. And part of this presentation today is to make sure that everyone in the organization is aligned to what we are trying to do. But our leadership, the present leadership, has a vision and where we're going, but the next level of leadership and those that are coming after us need to take on this baton and make sure that we are still striving for sustainable outcomes. Those are the inputs to an organization that's going to last. It then turns obviously into action steps in each one of these areas of strategy. I'd just like to talk particularly about that one. So there is Aurum defining impact. The bottom over there, as I said, the rock. This is primarily what you are involved in the organization. It's really, really important that we are involved in making sure that we deliver the goods. It means we are accountable for what we do. Funders want to know that if you say you're going to do ABC, you do ABC and not something else. Or alternatively, you do ABC, but sorry, we needed some other resources, and or we wasted your money, or we misgoverned it. They need to know that we are accountable and we do what we say we would do. The important inputs to that, apart from some that I'll talk about operationally, are an organization of experts. Each person here is employed for their expertise, for what they bring to the organization. So if you're in grants management, we expect you to be an expert in grants management, because you're going to be important in accounting to funders. If we're going to go into diabetes as a diversification strategy, we need to make sure we've got real experts in diabetes. We can't wheel in the TB guys and say, well, do a bit on the side. Now, there was a very interesting example of this very point, and it was in the room next door to us. We were interviewing people for one of our new divisional managing directors. We had a vacancy in the TB area, and we wanted to employ somebody new. So we got a whole lot of doctors in and people that looked like really good CVs, and I think the HR people will know some of them. And the one gentleman that came in was very, very interesting. You'll forgive my accent, and those watching this video later will forgive it too, I hope. But he was from a French-speaking background, and he came in with a very, very smart, shall we call it yellow ochre, maybe ochre green suit, and it had a big flower here. And he came in and he said, "Good morning," and he expressed himself very, very well. He had a degree from the Institut Marie Claire in France, and he'd worked for Servier, and he was very experienced in TB and in diabetes, and he knows everything. And his CV looks good. He's a doctor. He's got a degree from a prestigious institute. Worked for an incredibly well-known drug company. Impressive in the way that he spoke. And as I sat there, I thought, there was like, everything was just really good about this guy, apart from the flower sticking out here, but it was a bit like a cracked bell, you know, when you go tuck and it doesn't go ding. I thought, let me just check something here. So I said to him, "Tell me, you are very experienced in tuberculosis and in diabetes. What is the connection between TB and diabetes?" Now, in essence, the connection is that diabetes lowers your immune system, much like HIV does. And if you have a lowered immune system, you're more prone to tuberculosis. So it's a very elementary question. And the French gentleman with his degrees from the Institut Marie Claire and from the Servier Institute paused and he said, "There is no connection between them." I said, "No? No, one is in the lung and the other one is in the pancreas." And I knew, he's a dud. There's something seriously wrong. We phoned up some of his references and it turned out he wasn't a doctor at all. His degrees were bogus, the whole thing was a fake, but he was a really, really good salesman. We can't have those kind of experts on the team. So each one of you, I hope we're going to do a very careful check. HR is busy looking carefully into your backgrounds. No bogus French degrees, I hope. Obviously, the second part of accountability is to make sure that our systems are world-class. Now, we have good systems as an organization, and compared to many NGOs, really good systems. But they're not world-class yet. They're going there. We are budgeting to do that. We are making sure we put in a huge amount of effort to have world-class systems to support a world-class growing organization. A lot of effort, especially from people here in the support services, is going to go into making sure that the sharp end of this organization is backed up by world-class systems. The funders want to know that they get good accountability for their money. And the systems help demonstrate that. Those are the inputs to accountable delivery. And it's all within an ethos of professionalism and quality improvement. During the course of 2017, we're going to be rolling out quality improvement to every part of this organization. The methodologies for quality improvement, how you can embark upon quality improvement projects in your particular area, and how you measure them, and how you demonstrate that your quality is improving. That is critically important to the way we do things around here. We've got to be professional and define what that means and roll out a QI culture. All of that then is the strategic plan to how we're going to be sustainable as an organization. So let's go on to the next slide. Accountable delivery in detail especially means for us as an organization, firstly, that we meet our targets. That is what funders' number one concern is. If you say you're going to do 5,654 medical circumcisions, they're not interested in 4,385 and a long explanation. If you say you're going to recruit 2,000 people into a clinical trial, they don't want to know about, sure, well, we managed to do 1,340, but there was this political thing and that other thing, and sorry, we couldn't make it. They're not interested. They want to know that you deliver on what you said you would do. Now, we know this works because some of our new grants that we've just got, especially in the whole area of clinical trials, strongly influenced by the past performance to targets that Aurum has pursued. So targets, critical. Secondly, we need to be on standard. You've got to do it the right way. So, I mean, guys, you go to the MMC clinic where they're going to do a circumcision, and they say, well, we're going to do the circumcision, and when you chopped it off short. It wasn't to standard. You say, oh, well, you know, within 3 standard deviations, it was more or less right. It's a bit short. Well, don't worry about it. No, it's got to be right. How do I know this? At the end of the month, Do you want me to more or less get your salary right? Yeah, sort of right. Drop 1,000 here or there. Well, you want it to be right. We want it to be right. Our funders want it to be right. Obviously, they're very interested in the mighty dollar. It's got to be within budget. There's no point in saying we met the targets and it was a great standard, but we blew the budget in its glory. They haven't got more funding for us. They want us to come in under budget. Critically important. Of course, there's no point in being on target with the standards and under the money and you're damn late. Impossibly. Sorry, we did meet all that stuff, but it's irrelevant. Now, this is particularly important in research. If you do a research study and you work all of those things really nicely and you produce your final magnum opus, here it is. Da-da-da-da, we have proven X, Y, or Z. And they say, well, it's not relevant anymore. We've cured that long time ago. It's irrelevant because it was late. And this has been real. We've seen some of these areas in health economics. Colleagues build health economics models that really, really show what happened. But by the time they do the decisions on which they were going to base their information, it's long gone irrelevant. On time. And lastly, especially for grants management, we have to comply. Funders have myriads of rules, laws, regulations, requirements that we need to comply with. And if we don't comply with them, it comes back to bite. They are very, very picky. Why? Because others have abused their good nature and their generosity. So they put in piles of laws. And now we must live with the laws. But we do need to comply. So there you have it. Accountable delivery means being on target, to standards, to budget, on time, and comply. And do that, and funders will bring you further funding towards sustainability. So that's really, really important. All right, so now we've discussed the strategic imperatives for the organization. What's absolutely critical if we're going to take the organization forward? The next thing, obviously, how are we going to get there in terms of the structure? What structure supports this strategy? Let's have a look at that. Firstly, Aurum remains the Aurum Institute, NPC, a South African company. It has a board of directors registered in South Africa, which is supported by governance committees, such as an audit committee and a HR or remuneration committee, and a number of different auditors, assurance providers as they're called. There is a group chief executive, Professor Gavin Churchard, who leads this organization. He was its founder and he takes the organization forward. But his focus is going to be on growing the international side of the organization. So he's going to be taking care of Aurum USA and a number of other expansion programs into other countries. At the other end of the spectrum over here, I've mentioned Aurum Innova, managed by a chief executive officer who looks after the for-profit side of our organization. Obviously, it's about the money in many ways, and our group chief financial officer looks after our treasury, group finance, financial systems, and audit and compliance. And in the middle, there's the Southern African region, which is the area that we are discussing primarily today. That's the broad structure of organization. An international component, a for-profit component, financial governance and oversight, and the operations of the Southern African region. So let's have a look, a little bit more detail. How are we going to take our strategy as an organization forward? Firstly, we've created this group Southern Africa structure, and you are part of the Southern African region. We have then divisionalized the Southern African region to focus on accountability. At present, as you'll see shortly, there are 4 divisions. They are very focused on making sure we deliver to very key programs. And lastly, obviously, like any other organization, there are a number of technical directorates and corporate services that support the organization. So we have divisions supported by technical areas and essential services, or corporate services as some might call them. So let's have a look. What does that mean practically? 4 operating divisions make up the Southern African region. The first is the Health Systems Division. It's headed up by Mr. Bulalani Kawani. He's the managing director of that division. It focuses on our biggest PEPFAR grant. It makes up about 65% of Aurum's revenue. It's focused on supporting health systems strengthening in the Department of Health in a number of regions throughout the country. a very, very big employer, about 700 employees in this part of the organization, and it's scattered throughout the country, as we'll see in some of the maps. The second division is the Public Health Division. It's headed up by Dr. Rogerio Pili, and it focuses on support services for the Global Fund Grant, which carries out its work in peri-mine communities and in prisons. They do a lot of work in terms of x-raying prisoners in prisons throughout the country. And then also a health system strengthening grant from PEPFAR through the CDC to support prisons as well. It also is looking at the moment as we speak in a new tender that we have just won from the Department of Health to carry out circumcisions across 14 different districts in the country. The third and very interesting division is the Clinical Research Division. It's headed up by Dr. Vinod Edward as its Managing Director, and it carries out clinical trials in HIV and TB in a very, very broad range of areas, including host-directed therapies, basic sciences, vaccines, drugs, drug regimens, and other areas of diseases where we're trying different things. And it's this division over here that on World AIDS Day is participating with 3 of its sites getting involved in HVTN 702, the new HIV vaccine trial. And lastly, the Implementation Research Division headed by Dr. Salome Charalambous, who's been at Aurum almost as long as Gavin has, and heads up the kind of research that tries out new things in implementation science. New ideas to make things work in health systems and proving that they actually work. Specialized epidemiology. Those are the 4 operating divisions that we have for now. They may expand and hopefully won't shrink. They'll shrink if we don't deliver. They will grow if we continue to deliver. How do I know that? Well, this division here has just had a new grant renewed for $30 million for next year. This one here has 44 clinical trials running at the moment. 3 years ago, we were about to close it down. When Vinod came, turned it around, and they deliver the goods. Now they've got 44 trials and people knocking on the door for more. This division has just had a new grant renewed for 115 million rand. And Salome is rolling out one of the best, most interesting studies in TB prevention that we're going to see, and I'll share with you in a little while. 4 operating divisions. Let's have a look at the structure that underpins that. There's a CEO for Southern Africa, and I'll come back to that. There's your 4 divisions. There's a director of finance that's looking after the region's finances. A director of human resources. Obviously, this is the biggest employer of people in the organization. There are about 1,400 employees in Aurum at the moment. Obviously, HR critically important. And underneath each of these managing directors, there are principal investigators, operating staff, financial staff, HR staff, grants management staff, particularly important, and various technical and data management support staff. At the center, there is a technical services set of directorates which provide cross-cutting services across these divisions. A director of quality improvement and training, a director of our management development program, a director of the clinicians that we have in our organization, a number of doctors and nurses, somebody looking after monitoring and evaluation, and then lastly, data management, critically important. We're a knowledge management organization after all. And then of course we have to have corporate services, ICT, information and communications technology, grants management, cuts across, and of course communications, public relations, projects that are not particular to any one of these areas, asset management, facilities management. That makes up the structure of the SA region reporting into the global CEO. Areas like science, epidemiology, and health economics report into the implementation research division over there. And we're building up a lot of capacity around that in the year that lies ahead. So if that's the structure, who are the people behind the structure? Well, of course, at the top of everything, there's got to be the boss. Why is there a bass guitar there? Well, in my spare time when I'm not trying to run the SA region, I play bass guitar. Or I try to play bass guitar anyway, and really enjoy that. The rest of the regalia is probably a bit over the top. But you get the idea. I'm watching. Okay, I'm obviously supported by an ExCo, which are very capable people. Let me just reintroduce them to you very briefly. Obviously, there's myself. Our Group Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Mike Roy. He's a chartered accountant, was for many years a partner at PwC, and then has also run a number of companies. And he looks after group finance. I've introduced already Mr. Bulelani Kawani as the MD of Health Services Division. Dr. Roger Pilley looking after the Public Health Division. Dr. Edward looking after the Clinical Research Division. And Dr. Salome Sharalambis looking after the Implementation Research Division. Our Regional Director of Finance is Sheila Hurry. Mike McMillan heads up HR. Lauren de Kock is the Chair of the Technical Directorate. And Helen Kisby-Green looks after Public Relations and Communications in the organization. And then there are some other individuals I just want to mention over here as well. Dr. Petra Kruger is the person who heads up our Management Development and Pharmacy Services program. What we find a lot in the areas we serve in helping communities and helping facilities of the Department of Health is that managers who are in those facilities have often never been trained in management. They get to their role by being good clinicians and then getting promoted into management and go from being a great clinician to a hopeless manager because they've never been trained. This is a very important directorate. Dr. Mpho Maresani looks after the clinicians and convenes a clinicians working group to get input from clinicians on areas of mutual concern. And Tricia Crawford looks after our data management. We've just appointed Sue Duplessis, who looks after our monitoring and evaluation as well. So that's the team that supports me in terms of running the Southern African region, and obviously some of those areas support the global group as well. What do the next few years look like for Aurum? I've said go global. We've started with a regional area. We've started with something that happens to be relevant to our part of the world. What about going elsewhere if we want to become sustainable, if we want to take that strategy of diversification forward? Well, let's have a look. Firstly, we have an excellent project pipeline. You are joining the company at a time when it's growing exponentially. That brings its challenges, of course. If you're growing exponentially, your systems tend to sag under the pressure, and that's part of the reason why many of you are here. But you can see we have support from the likes of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Global Fund. CDC is our biggest and most important PEPFAR funding support partner. USAID also has an important role to play. And interestingly enough, just out of one of the many funders in clinical trials, we are now the world's largest HIV vaccine trials network partner by virtue of the number of sites and studies that we are carrying out. So we have a really good project pipeline of people who are willing to support us because we do good work. But it's always only as good as the next deliverable. So please don't forget, on target, to time, to standard, to budget, and comply. Critically important. With that project pipeline, however, we can support growth. Up until about September this year, we had this coverage of South Africa in terms of the projects that we're doing. Health system strengthening in the red areas. We were supporting a large grant around human resources support to the Department of Health in all of those yellow blocks. That grant has subsequently now closed and come to an end, so those yellow blocks disappear. A number of research programs, and if we were to add all the prisons in fact we would color this map in because we support all prisons throughout the country with respect to health system strengthening and screening for TB and HIV in prisons. But that's our footprint at present. If we take away that HR support on the next slide, you'll see that it looks a bit more like that. Now, as I say, we can't color in the whole map because of the prisons are a very small population, about 150,000 people out of a population of some 60 million. But if that's our footprint of funded stuff for now, what is the vision that we need to be ultimately looking to support? Well, that is, as I see it, that. I want us to be represented as an organization in every single district and be relevant in every part of this country. Now, those of you who are really observant will notice strange looking blank spaces there. No, we are not forgetting about Lesotho and Swaziland from a point of view of the regional area. They are critically important to our development and to our funders, and we have grant applications in at the moment in both of those areas to try and extend our influence, our support, our diversification into those areas. I'm looking for Aurum everywhere, and I'm looking for you to be part of it and helping us make that. Not because we want to be an empire, but because we want to make a difference to the people, especially those living in poverty. And we know we've got something to offer. So that's our South African footprint. What about growth elsewhere? Well, you may be very interested to know about some of our international work which is already going on. We are not aspirant international organization. We are actually doing stuff. At the leadership and policy level, a number of our leaders are already working on WHO task force groups, committees, influencing international policy. We are involved in a number of international clinical trials networks as leading staff members on those areas or leading contributors to those committees. And we have a number of research and delivery projects which are already going into the global space. I want to draw your attention to this particular one over here, WIP3TB. This study is attempting to look at a very interesting and new approach to preventing tuberculosis in people with HIV. Up until now, we've been using a drug called isoniazid, which is an old TB drug. Those of you from a healthcare background will know isoniazid's been around 40 plus years. We've been using that drug on a basis of somebody takes this drug every day if they're HIV positive to prevent TB. And we know that if you take the drug every day, it works. It reduces your risk of getting TB if you're HIV positive by about 60%. The problem, like most of us, is taking your drug every single day. Now, antiretrovirals have to be taken every day. You'd think this is easy as well. But if you don't think that you're sick, well, then taking a drug every day is a real mission. You go to your GP and he gives you a script for an antibiotic for 2 weeks. Hands up all of those who actually stick it out for 2 weeks. Hands up those who stick it out for 1 week. We're pretty good at sleeping tablets and antidepressants. Those we're good at, but other rational things we don't do. We don't even look after our weight, and we don't look after our exercise, and we don't do all the other good things our doctors tell us to do. I know, I'm a doctor, trust me. WIP3TB is one of those kind of studies that tries to change that frame. And it's very interesting because isoniazid, as I said, you have to take it daily to prevent TB if you're HIV positive. We are adding another drug called rifapentine, also quite an old drug. But when you take isoniazid and rifapentine, you put them together, you can take that regimen once a week for 3 months, and the modeling suggests that that effect lasts then for a further 9 months. So you can imagine you take the drug for every Friday for 3 months, and stop, and the effect of protection lasts for 9 more months. The end of one standard pregnancy, which is 9 months, you do the same again. You take the 2 drugs for 3 weeks and protection. The modeling suggests this will work, and we are carrying out a trial right now to try and see if this works broadly. Everything suggests it's looking pretty good. What has that got to do with internationalization? Well, that study is being carried out, if you take the next slide, in South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. Aurum is already starting to go beyond the bounds of our local region. And you are arriving at a time when we are already expanding that. This study, 3HP, as we call it in short, is particularly important. Because if it works, it's the prelude to another very important study, which is the next one on the next slide. The Unit Aid Impact for TB study. It's taking that same regimen of isoniazid and rifapentine and rolling it out in 14 countries across the globe. Who would like to go to Cambodia? Not too keen, huh? What about Haiti? Also? No? Ghana? Okay, I've got a person who likes Ghana. China? Yeah, same person. Okay, great. What about Brazil? You need an itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot? No, okay, right, you don't. But Brazil? What I'm trying to show you here is that with a study that delivers, like WIP3TB, there are already funders who are willing to fund that concept into 14 different countries. Look at the budget, $50.4 million. And now I'm really, really excited to tell you, as part of this globalization strategy, that on today, World AIDS Day 2016, this is not a proposal. This project has been accepted by Unit Aid, and we have just won this award to take Aurum globally into 14 different countries. So like I said at the outset, this strategy is not pie in the sky stuff. This is a real strategy for a real organization that wants to be relevant in 100 years from now. And I hope that every one of you wants to be part of that. And I hope that you watching this video later will realize that you are part of an organization that really wants to make a difference to the people of this country, to the people that are out there in poor communities, and into our region and into Africa and elsewhere in the world. I've just shown you that this is not a pie in the sky strategy, and I hope that you'll be part of it. So Aurum has a strategy to go into the global space and become relevant, as I said to you in the very beginning of this slide set. So that's pretty good, I think. Very keen to be part of a global organization. Got your passports? I'm not joking, because the people that are going to lead these areas have to come from within the organization now, as well as from other organizations in those countries. You can't take the ethos of this company to those places if it's not people from here. We hope that you'll be part of that. Okay, so that's really interesting, exciting. As I told you, it's not pie in the sky stuff. Let's have a look from here. What about communicating this strategy? So you are today part of communicating this strategy to a broader audience of those who will come to Aurum after this, and staff who need to go through renewal. So I'm addressing you also, those of you who still to come to Aurum. I hope that you'll be part of this strategy. We are going to communicate this through video platforms. We're going to communicate it also through a number of other options. Let's have a look. I don't want this kind of communication. Imagine, guys, you go there and you're going in for an eye examination, you come out short. I thought I was getting this and something else happened. Alternatively, you go in there for the circumcision and say, well, you came out with glasses. But actually, it's quite interesting. This is a case in point around this slide's a bit of it. One of our clinics that we have that does circumcision is a very high volume clinic. And as you probably know, circumcisions are done in huge numbers in winter time. And it tails off quite significantly in summertime for reasons that perhaps lie in culture and we don't really know. And we want to use those clinics for other purposes when it's low season. And one of the things that you can interestingly do at a clinic like that is cataract surgery. So maybe eye clinic, circumcision in the same clinic, probably not in the same place, is a future prospect for us. But communication from the organization is going to come in things like this video presentation, which you'll be able to watch later. We have an organizational daily communication letter that goes out via email called the Daily Vector. A vector is something that carries a particle of immune structures into the body, as we call it, in vaccine science. So the Daily Vector goes out. You'll be able to see more updates about what's going on in the strategy by looking at the Daily Vector. We have an excellent dashboard of what's going on. When you open your computer, you ought to be able to see the Aurum dashboard. And if you haven't got this as your home page, please contact the IT department and they can put it on for you. This will give you an opportunity to link into what's going on in the organization. You'll be able to see the different programs and see what they're up to, how they're doing, what the opportunities are, what results they're producing. We have a very, very good website which details this all again, obviously for a more external audience, but a huge amount of information about the organization is on the website. And I would encourage you to have a look at it. And then, of course, Aurum Facebook. We have a very active Facebook site that we use a lot, and people interact with us. Our communities interact with us, especially. You'll notice that I haven't put up Twitter, birdie stuff here, mainly because I don't understand it. I haven't got my head around 183 characters. I'm not even sure if it is 183 characters. I just don't get it. But I believe that there is an Aurum Twitter site too, and you can interact and find out more and ask of the communications team around that. So if you're good at Facebook and you know how to tweet birdie stuff, that's there for you too. We want to use every possible medium to make sure that our staff and our stakeholders know what's going on in the organization. So that is critical to our communication. Please make use of those opportunities. And if you're not sure, our PR or our ICT departments will help you to set up your equipment to look at those areas of communication. Communication, critical. Let's have a look. It's all very good to have a strategy presentation. It's all great for me to come and tell you what I think our vision should be and where we're going to. You have to be asking, well, what's in it for me? Why is it important that I buy into this strategy? Well, we're not this kind of organization that you'll see on the next slide. We're not an outpatients department that purports to be a hospital, but the background is something that's dying out. There's something in it for you. This upfront strategy does not have that in the background. What's that in the background that you can enjoy if you're a part of this organization? Let's have a look. There is a clear, relevant vision for this company. I hope when you leave here today and you've finished watching this video, you will buy into the fact that there's some place for you in this vision. It's not just for Southern Africa, it goes beyond that. We are stable at the moment, we are growing, we have a good pipeline, we have great opportunity. You have great opportunity by joining this organization. Provided we deliver, there's career opportunity. It goes beyond just what we're doing now in Southern Africa and could potentially go into other countries. There's plenty of place for people to become leaders if we're going to go along this growth route. You can be involved in strategic growth, in decision making, in leadership. Our structures are differently placed and organized for different types of opportunities. There's place for people to be used for their expertise, to bring their intellectual capacity to the fore, and to be innovative regardless of where you are working. So if you're in finance, you can come up with innovative financial ideas. If you've got a new way of doing data management that you think could benefit the organization, I can assure you there are people who are prepared to hear. And if you come up with the next hula hoop that's going to make millions of dollars for the core funding, there's even a company to take that forward, and we can sell hula hoops to the nations, or Rubik's cubes, or whatever it is. There is space in this strategy for you to create your own legacy and to be part of our legacy. So that when Helen measures us in 100 years' time and takes out her clipboard, she can say, yeah, he wasn't talking a load of rubbish. We've done everything we said we would do. And they were right. We've made a difference. We are still relevant today. And that may be, as I said, in 2116. So, there's a huge amount to do. Every one of you is part of a growing organization. We look to you to be accountable in doing what you said you would do when you joined the organization. I hope that you will join me in this vision and in this journey. I look forward to interacting with you all as you grow with this organization. And we will talk more, I'm absolutely certain. So thanks for giving me your time today.